It was one of those days when everything felt heavy. The kind of day where the sun seemed to shy away, hiding behind thick clouds that only added to the gloom. Kate sat by her window, staring blankly outside. The world moved on, but she felt stuck, lost in a whirlpool of her own thoughts. Everything seemed pointless, like she was floating in a sea of nothingness. Kate had been a beacon of strength for so many around her. She was the one people turned to when they needed advice, a comforting word, or just a shoulder to cry on. But today, she felt like she had no strength left for herself. Her well of optimism had run dry, and all she could feel was the overwhelming weight of sadness. The cause of her despair was not one single event, but a series of small disappointments that had accumulated over time. Her career was at a standstill, her relationships felt strained, and she was battling the creeping sense of loneliness that had been slowly engulfing her life. She had tried everything to pull herself out of it: distractions, talking to friends, even throwing herself into work, but nothing seemed to help. The sadness was persistent, like a stubborn stain that wouldn't wash away. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, Kate's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at it, her first instinct being to ignore it. But something made her reach out and pick it up. It was a message from her grandmother, a woman whose wisdom and love had always been a guiding light in Kate's life. The message was simple: listen to this when you're feeling down. Attached to the message was a link to a voice recording. Kate hesitated for a moment, then pressed play. The recording began with the soft, familiar sound of her grandmother's voice. "Hello, my dear Kate," the voice began. "If you're listening to this, I know you're going through a tough time. And I know how hard it is to see the light when everything around you seems dark. But I want to tell you a story. It's a story that helped me when I was your age, facing my own battles." Kate leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as she listened. Her grandmother's voice was a soothing balm to her weary soul, and she found herself getting lost in the tale. "When I was young, much like you are now," her grandmother continued, "I went through a time when I felt utterly lost. Nothing seemed to go right, and I was filled with doubt about my future. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and it felt like the world was moving forward while I was stuck in place. One day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I wandered down to the edge of the village, where there was a small, hidden garden that few people knew about. It was a place I often went to when I needed to think. But on this particular day, as I sat on the old stone bench, I noticed something unusual. There was a small plant growing out of a crack in the pavement. It was tiny, fragile looking, but there it was, standing tall despite the odds. I found myself staring at that little plant for a long time. How had it managed to grow there, in such an inhospitable place? The pavement was hard, and the crack was so narrow. But somehow, it had found a way to push through. It had fought against the odds and was reaching for the sun, determined to thrive despite its circumstances. That little plant, Kate, became a symbol of hope for me. It reminded me that even in the most difficult situations, life finds a way. And so can we.